Hey there, Squirrel Army! How's it going? Time for another one of our precon upgrade guides. This is the Orzhov Growing Threat Precon Upgrade Guide. Now, with these commander decks, I always find that it's best just to start by looking at our face commander and seeing what he does and seeing what direction that commander is trying to take us in to start building around these decks. And if you haven't seen what the face commander of this deck is, Brimaz. We haven't seen Brimaz in quite a while. So that's kind of cool. He's Orzhov now. Never really seen an Orzhov Brimaz, but that's cool as well. So, when you cast a Phyrexian or you cast an artifact creature spell, you incubate X, where X is that spell's mana value. Now incubate's the new mechanic from the new set where you get these artifacts that basically become 0/0 Phyrexians and whatnot that you put counters on and can transform and all this sort of stuff. I'm not 100% on the mechanic yet. I haven't read everything about the mechanic, but it's an interesting mechanic. I think getting a lot of those Phyrexians and whatnot. And he is a Phyrexian cat, so he's been Phyrexified in this one. So, yeah, that's alright. Beginning of end step, if a Phyrexian died under our control, we proliferate. So, again, the idea of we're going to make these incubation things that are basically growing Phyrexians, putting counters on them, proliferating. So we want to be doing as much Phyrexian stroke artifact stuff that we can do, and cloning of artifacts and copying of artifacts, doubling of tokens and artifacts and whatnot that we can do. Double ETBs, some of that sort of stuff maybe as well. But just as many Phyrexians as we can. There's not going to be that many. And yeah, definitely a lot of artifacts as well. But we have to have a really good look at the deck list to see what's actually within the list and see what's going on within there to actually start making decisions about the type of real cards that we want, because there might be some really good new ones, and there are probably some new ones from the new set, though it's always hard to find the new ones from the new set because they don't come up online properly for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and like a lot of the new cards from weeks and weeks and weeks and months, people just don't know what they do because they're just new cards. And whatnot. So it's hard to find some of these cards and whatnot. And remember that some of these cards exist because there's 20 million sets every 5 minutes and whatnot. But again, I still think that this deck does want to sacrifice stuff as well, but we have to sacrifice Phyrexians. So we've got to find ways of kind of making false Phyrexians and things like that we can easily sacrifice. Now, the incubation tokens, I do believe they're not Phyrexians until you transform them. I'm not 1,000% on the rules of that. So we've got to transform them into Phyrexians. So, yeah, that's going to be a little bit of a thing that I think you have to pay 2 mana for it. There are some things that transform them and whatnot, but again, still, like, if we could transform them easily and just they're basically 1/1s or 0/0s or whatever, then they'll just die anyway. But it's only at the beginning of each end step anyway, so the way we're going to get maximum value out of this is by generating those things, those death triggers, for those proliferates on each opponent's turn as well as our own. So we've really got to think about sack engines and things like that in this deck as well. But that's going to be tough. So I think we want. It's tough to get artifact creatures that do that. We could have some artifacts that definitely do it. I don't know whether there's any Phyrexians that do it. But again, we have to look at the deck. But, so, um, let's go and have a look at the actual deck list so that we can actually see what we have to work with and see what we want to cut and keep and whatnot. Alright, so here we are, having a bit of a look at the deck list, and as always you can find these deck lists by just searching them up if you want to. So I have thought about this one. It's kind of a tough deck because there's honestly not that many Phyrexians in our colours. There's a few artifacts in our colours, certainly. So we might be more heavy on artifacts rather than full on Phyrexians. Um, we do have black in our colours, and black does do a lot of stuff with death and reanimation and that sort of thing. So we could have some decent stuff there. So yeah, you can join the Screw Army by subscribing. Alright, so here we are, checking out the finished list. As I said, doesn't come out to exactly 100 because still there's 4 cards from the commander deck that don't show up, so it is what it is. It's just going to take way too long, again, as I say, to wait for those cards to actually turn up. So just have to do it as it is. So it is what it is. But yeah, it is what it is. Here we go, anyway. And as I always say, guys, if you're not that interested in listening to me tell you why I've cut cards or why I've added cards, why certain cards are in, whatnot, that sort of stuff, you just want to see the list, you just want to see what is happening, you want to copy, you want to paste, you want to figure it out, whatever it is, check the deck list out that I have there in the comments so you can do whatever you want with it and whatnot. But for those people who do want to see what I've done here, I will go through it as quickly as what I can, of course. As always, I'm not really going to go through the lands for the most part because I just cut all the bad tap lands and just put in some basics. So there's nothing really to say there. Anyone can do that, and anyone can do a better job than that, but that's the most simple job that you can do with a lot of these decks, and it's something I suggest everyone just do. Just cut all the bad tap lands and just put in basics. Your deck will be a lot better for it, for the most part. Just, it'll be faster because you don't get lands coming in tapped, and if you've got the right ratios, you'll still hit your colours. So, and it's not very hard in 2 colours, honestly. But yeah. Anyway, let's go through the cuts. Ambitions cost. I don't like these one-off card draw effects, and plus it's 4 mana at sorcery speed, so it does draw 3 cards, and that's a pretty decent rate. But again, like, if I want a card draw spell, I want it to be instant for the most part, or be synergistic to what I'm actually doing, or, again, cost 1 or 2 mana or whatever. So, just doesn't really do a whole lot for us. It's nice to get card draw, but we want consistent card draw. Blade Splicer, it really doesn't do anything with what the deck's doing. We're not, like, we do have some stuff that is golems and stuff, but, like, it really doesn't do anything, and it's a one-off effect, so it's just, like, well, we can get better things, so, no. The Gargantuan, I like that it has Unearth. Its Unearth cost isn't too bad, but for a 6 cost, it isn't that amazing. And thinking that we'll only get that 1 used out of its Unearth isn't that amazing. Plus, it's not a Phyrexian or an artifact, so... And its ability just to draw a card and lose a life, a one-off effect, isn't that amazing either. Yeah, we'd get a 4 or 5 attacker, but still, it's just small potatoes for the most part, so just can take it out. Fractured Power Stone. I actually looked through the list, and there's probably enough ramp in the deck without it. Plus, it really doesn't do that much for us unless you're actually playing the whole planar dice thing, or it doesn't give us good color fixing or whatever. So I don't really think that there's much to it. There's some other mana rocks that are in here that aren't that super duper amazing, but they do have other abilities, to sack to draw cards or whatnot, that sort of thing. So that can be useful still. In a sort of more budget casual deck, so that's fine. Spicer, again, just we're not doing enough with golems for this to do anything, and it's a one-off effect. Like Meteor Golem, as I said, we did have some golem effects in the deck, but a lot of the golems that are in the deck or were in the deck are pretty bad. This one's not terrible if we didn't have, or if we did have bad removal or whatever. It is an artifact, so that does sort of synergize with what we're kind of doing. But for 7 mana, we could already be winning the game. So, and we already have really good removal in black and white, so we just don't need this thing at all. Mere Biosphere, again, we could just be winning the game at the point that we're trying to cast this thing. So, getting this thing that makes 4 random 1/1 mirrors and then it doesn't do anything, just, like, no. Like, if we were in a reanimator deck, well, we are sort of, but, like, if we were cheating things in from our graveyard a lot, then maybe we could think about it, but or something else like that. But, again, it's pretty slow and small potatoes, so not really worth our time. The Nettlecist, like, we're not a Voltron deck, so this is something that's really for a Voltron deck. This is something that buffs up one thing and helps it. We're not really about one thing, we're about many things. And yes, it can help one thing that is kind of lagging behind, but again, for the most part, we want to buff our entire stuff, not just one thing. So I don't see the point in it. Night's Whisper, again, don't like these one-off card draw effects. They're not worth our time. The Gear Hulk, again, just this one-off kill spell for a non-black creature, and then you just get a 5/4 menace. Yes, it is an artifact, but for 6 mana, again, we've got really good removal in these colors, so I don't think it's worth it that much for us, so just cut it. Phyrexian Delver, again, like, if we were flickering things a lot, this wouldn't be too bad to get back things every single turn or whatever, but we're not flickering things, and we can't recur things super duper easy. Like, we can recur things, but not super duper easily. This can recur things, but it's not a Phyrexian, it's not an artifact, it's 5 mana to get something back. So I don't know. There's just better things that we could be playing. So yeah, I just don't know. The scriptures, I think a lot of these cards are in here because they say Phyrexian. Like the Phyrexian Delver, it's in here because it says it's a Phyrexian, though it isn't. This is in here because it says Phyrexian, or whatever. But it's just so slow. Like, it can do stuff, but it can also just do nothing. Like, it's one of those cards that it does take so long for it to do the thing that you really want it to do, which is exile all, or destroy all opponent's stuff, essentially. Which is still only 1 turn rotation, but still that is a fair way, especially when people know what it is and know that it's coming. People won't want to lose their stuff. So they're just going to be like, blow this up as fast as possible. That, or try to kill you as fast as possible, so that this thing doesn't go off and they don't lose their stuff or whatever, or they don't lose the game just for you blowing up all their stuff. So yeah, I just find that it's just, like, if it was 4 mana destroy all non-artifact creatures, that would be pretty darn good because, again, mostly artifacts here and there. So yeah, like, that would be just better. But anyway, The trainer form, again, 9 mana is a lot of mana. At that point, we could really be winning the game. The Encore, same thing. Like, we could really be winning the game and just getting a bunch of 9/9s that'll leave behind some 3/3s. Like, not that it's terrible, but it's just like, if we're going up in power, we need to get away from this, like, more janky strategy. We need to get to, okay, how do we win somewhat efficiently in some way? Not just, oh, here's some big dumb stuff. That's cool, and if you want to do that, that's fine. But again, this isn't a golem deck or whatever, and it is an artifact again. This is a Phyrexians and artifacts deck, and a sacrifice deck, and it's a deck where we're trying to proliferate and do all this other stuff. So it's not really doing what this guy's trying to do. It does do stuff with the graveyard, but the Angel, like, gaining some life is nice, but it's not what we're doing. We're not trying to gain life. Like, some life gain is nice, but again, just, we could find some lifelink enchantments, or we could find a lifelink Phyrexian, or whatever. The 3/3 flying body just isn't worth the time to put in. So yeah, I just don't see the point in running the card at all. Victimize, again, I don't like these one-off, effects. So I just take it out. It's not really worth the time, I don't think. The Vile Offering, if it wasn't sorcery, I actually would like it, but I think that being a sorcery just really hurts it. And it is 5 mana, so recurring a thing and killing a thing, that might be well worth it, but yeah, it's so tough to say. But again, there's a couple of cards that kind of do that as well, that are just better, so we could just run those. We don't really need it. Like, we've got really good removal as it is. And speaking of the instant speed removal, I'm pretty sure we didn't remove anything, or we didn't add anything, rather, into this. Though I thought I should have gotten rid of Mortify. But whatever, that can stay there for now. Actually, I really want to talk about this card at some point. So, because this card is pretty darn good, the Rise of the Imperfect. So, yeah, I do want to talk about that card. It's really good. Enchantments, because we only got a couple of enchantments. Sagada Summons, since it's first on the play. Again, we're making all of our Phyrexians with these +1 counters, so why not we change them from being just these Phyrexians are on the ground into being these base 4/4 flyers, plus all the whatever counters that we've got on them. It's just going to be able to change our game from, diddling around or whatever to being, oh, okay, we can just either kill everyone or we're so close to killing everyone, it's ridiculous. So it's so amazingly good. The Phyrexian Reclamation, we can return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. That's pretty good for us because, again, we want those sack loops so that we can keep proliferating and keep doing things that we want to do. And there's just often times that our creatures will die by board wipes or by people killing them or whatever else, or just by having to need to block in combat or whatever, or just dying through combat or whatever. So there's many times that this will be useful. I've decided to put it in a few decks that actually have black because it's just so useful to get those creatures back at such a small cost. Divine Visitation, again, just we're making these Phyrexian token things and maybe a few other tokens here and there, but just getting this thing that we need to pay 2 mana for into a 4/4 that's already can block, attack, do stuff for us, etc. is just so powerful. We'll just change our game from diddling around to suddenly we're poised to win, or so close to poised to win that it's not funny. Agent of the Iron Throw, yeah, again, these cards that care about your commander being on the field sometimes are a little bit worse, but it's still pretty darn useful, and we are playing commander, so we're always going to have access to our commander, So again, not that bad. So whenever an artifact or creature we control dies, each opponent's going to lose 1 life for the most part. So that's really powerful sort of an effect. So we really want that so that we can, take our opponents down. I think we only added a couple of artifacts, that being Ashnod's Altar. Ugh, words. But yeah, we added that because, again, we want to sack things, or we want a free sack outlet, and making mana isn't too bad, though we've got a lot of ramp in this deck, and that's another reason why I thought, well, we've got enough ramp. So, yeah. I did add Phyrexian Altar. I didn't think I had Phyrexian Altar. I thought this was a bit expensive, but obviously I decided that it was alright. But same thing, just sack things for mana, it's really good. What else have we got in here? Actually, I think we should have gotten rid of the Scythe Claw, but whatever. What the heck? Soul Ring. Oh, that's a Soul Ring, isn't it? Yeah. This looks weird. Yeah, the Throne of Geth. Yeah, just sacrificing some random artifact to proliferate. Like, again, we make these Phyrexian tokens, but, like, they're often, like, when we make one small one, it's like, well, that's cool and all, but we want to make a lot of our other ones that are bigger and better and badder, bigger and better and badder. We don't want to just make these random 1/1s unless we're like making them into 4/4s or whatever. But when we aren't doing that, we want to make our bigger things bigger. And even when they're 4/4s, we can still be like, well, I can still make my other things bigger based on just sacrificing ones that are just smaller. So it's probably worth the time to think about. Alright, creatures. The Bastion of the Belina's Ruin here. It sacrifices stuff. So I thought that was alright. Plus, it gives counters to all of our stuff. So it feels on theme with we sack stuff, we get counters. So I feel like that works pretty well. With what we're trying to do. It is a tap ability, but that's alright. And it is a Phyrexian, so I did get it there. So we do have that. We got the Black Dominus. I think that this one's great for this deck because we're sacrificing stuff, so doubling up our dies triggers is pretty strong. And the fact that we'll have a few things in our graveyard to exile with it to give it an indestructible seems just fine. Plus, like, there's a lot of times where we will have a lot of things that are in our graveyard that aren't that amazing or that just aren't worth the time. That or somebody will just go to exile them. So we might as well get some benefit out of our opponents wanting to exile our stuff. So yeah, I thought that was pretty darn good. The Pilgrim, it's here because it's a Phyrexian, but it does gain us some life, which, that's fine, but whatever. It's here because, again, if our creatures die, our opponents lose life. So it gives our opponents that, cause or whatever to be like, okay, I won't blow up your stuff because I don't want to lose 50 life or whatever it is, or 5 life or 10 life or whatever it is. Or even if they do, you're like, well, please lose 5 life, 6 life, 10 life, whatever it is. So that way, at least you're getting something out of it. You're keeping the board state moving for you or whatever. So that's all right. The Orthodoxy, this one's interesting. So when it or another Phyrexian enters, we get to incubate 2, which is pretty good. For us, we want to make these incubation tokens and whatnot. And if we can, keep a sack loop of some sort going, then we can get, basically infinite incubations, we can get infinite counters, that sort of thing, and we can win the game from there pretty easily. So, thought that would seem pretty good. The Butcher, a lot of new cards from the set seem good with this. There might be a few that I kind of missed, but I saw this one and thought this was pretty darn good. It buffs our Phyrexians. It is a Phyrexian. When it enters the battlefield, our Phyrexians get Menace until end of turn, which could be well worth it. Menace is a pretty decent ability, especially when you're in a token deck. You can sacrifice an artifact or a creature and return him from the graveyard to the battlefield, but we can only do it as a sorcery. So, again, we're in that sacrifice plan. So, that makes some amount of sense. Plus, we can buff our Phyrexians, and we can give them Menace for a turn whenever we want, and we can sacrifice him pretty easily, get him in the bin, get some extra benefits out of it. So, that's pretty good overall, I think. Might Overseer, I think this one's probably one of the best ones that I probably added, though it's pretty cheap. First Striker, as long as it's our turn, our creature tokens have +1/+0 first strike, which is nice. And then we can pay 3 and a white or a white Phyrexian mana to make a 1/1 Phyrexian Might creature token with Toxic 1 and it can't block. Like, again, it is a Phyrexian, so that's working with what we want. It makes, bodies that we can sacrifice or do whatever we need to do with them. Perhaps we want to infect people out. I don't know. It's probably not a real thing, but still, you could think about doing it. But yeah, just buffing all of our other stuff is still well worth it, and it has other abilities, the other abilities there, so that can be well worth our time to invest some time into. The Choir Master, our commander, when our commander ETBs or attacks, we can proliferate. So again, getting that proliferation going, and it's a Phyrexian, so that's pretty darn good. The Aspirant here, whenever we proliferate, each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. Hey, we're all about proliferating. Plus, again, it's a Phyrexian, so that makes a lot of sense. And this is one of the better uncommons, I think, from the set. I didn't really talk much about it because it's really only for very specific decks for the most part. And it's kind of one of those things that, yeah, you kind of do forget that it kind of exists, because if you're in 3 or 4 colours or even 5 colours, well, is that cutting the mustard? It kind of could, but yeah, I don't know. It can certainly scale a lot to the later games and whatnot. So, yeah, definitely should have been maybe one of those cards that we might have been talking about a bit more. But yeah, it's definitely worth the time to put in here. The Defectormite, I just did a video a while back on how good this thing is. It's definitely good in this deck because it can protect some of our key pieces from removal. That, or it makes our opponents use multiple removal spells just to kill this or to kill the thing that they're trying to kill. So that can be well worth it. Actually, Spellskite's another one of those things, though. I don't think it's a Phyrexian. Actually, isn't it in the deck here somewhere? Maybe? I'm not sure now. I just thought, wait a minute, isn't that in the deck here? Maybe it is. No. Oh well, whatever. That's a pretty good one too, but whatever. That's fine. Anyway, that is pretty much the list there anyway. You guys can let me know what you think. Write your thoughts down there in the comments below. Hope you've enjoyed, and hope you will come back into the next one.